Good morning, piano parents. Thank you for tuning into the show. Welcome to the Piano Parent Podcast, where I, being a piano teacher for almost 35 years and the parent of 4 mostly musical kids, try to share some of the things that are on my mind and some of the things that happen in my studio from time to time in the hopes of offering you encouragement as you are trying to help your piano kid make the most of their piano lessons, talking to your piano teacher and getting them to practice and all of the things. So we are in this together. And I was walking earlier this week, which is something I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. And I have discovered a new podcast, a new to me podcast called Mere Christians. And it's hosted by Jordan Rayner, and I'll link it up in the show notes to you, especially this particular episode that was an interview he was conducting with a man named Chad Cannon. And Chad made a comment sort of in passing, but it really connected to me, and I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days, and that's what I wanted to talk about with us today. He was talking about starting a new job, and how he felt he really wasn't qualified for the job, but he knew some people who had confidence in him. And so he was in this new position and didn't really know what he needed to do to facilitate the job. And his statement was, human nature delays. And if it hadn't been for those people that were already believing in him that helped him get the job, and his boss, who had set some deadlines and some mile markers to complete this project, then he would have been stuck in a perpetual system of delay. And how he was so grateful that he had those external motivators to get him going. Even if he wasn't sure what to do, he still got going and he learned as he went. So that idea of human nature delays really connected with me. I've got things in my own life that I want to do. I know they are important to do. I will be so happy when they are done. But putting the action behind the intention is where I'm falling into a little bit of a problem. And that's something that I discovered in my research for this episode. There's actually a thing called the intention action gap. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. It's kind of interesting to think about why we delay doing what we know is good for us and how it shows up with our piano kids too in their piano practice. And so today we'll talk about some things that your piano kids might be thinking, some things you may be dealing with, either dealing with your piano kids or just some of your own objectives that you would like to accomplish, and how we can maybe set up some systems to help both of us get a little further down the line, closer to action, and not just stuck with the intention idea. Oh, and before I get too far, I'm going to pull up an excerpt that I put on my phone. In addition to listening to this new to me podcast on those walks that are a new development in my schedule, I've also been listening to an audio book when I drive home from work. And by the way, even though I teach, I consider my real job teaching here in my piano studio. But in addition to that, I have a part-time job at a daycare where I get to do music with infants all the way up through pre-kindergarten, 3 days a week. And then I also have a part-time job at a local charter school where I get to teach general music education classes to kindergartners through 5th grade. So I have lots of wonderful music opportunities, and I have set up some rules for myself. When I'm driving to work in the morning, I listen to the Bible. When I'm driving or when I'm done with the daycare, then I've started this new walking routine, and I listen to a podcast there. And then when I'm driving home from either job, then I'm listening to this audiobook. Whether I keep up with all of these rules for myself or not, it's working right now. The book that I'm currently listening to on Audible is the Thursday Murder Club. And I was sort of interested in it because there's a Netflix movie out but I'm not going to let myself watch the Netflix movie until I've listened to the book. Anyway, thinking about this idea of human nature delays, I was listening to chapter 17 of Thursday Murder Club, and this is a little excerpt from that. And the setting of the Thursday Murder Club is in London. So some of this terminology is very British. And this little excerpt is from chapter 17, talking about Chris, introducing Chris, a detective that's one of the characters. It says Chris has his annual medical in 2 months. And every Monday, he convinces himself that this is finally the week that he gets back into shape. Finally shifts the stone or so that holds him back. The stone or so that gives him crimp, whatever crimp is. The stone or so that stops him from buying new clothes just in case. And it stops him from dating because who would want this? The stone or so that stands between him and the world. 2 stone, if he were really honest. Those Mondays are usually good. Chris doesn't take the lift on Mondays. Chris brings food from home on Mondays. Chris does sit-ups in bed on Mondays. But by Tuesday, or in a good week, Wednesday, the world creeps back in. The stairs seem too daunting, and Chris loses faith in the project. He's aware that the project is himself, and that drags him further down still. So out come the pasties and the crisps, the petrol station lunch, the quick drink after work, the takeaway on the way home from work, the chocolate on the way home from takeaway, the eating, the numbing, the release, the shame, and then repeat. But there was always next Monday, and one of these Mondays would be salvation. I think we have all probably bought a gym membership and never actually went to the gym, or maybe we made it the first week and then tapered off. So you get what I'm talking about as far as human nature delays. We're all wired to avoid discomfort and maybe follow the path of least resistance. Immediate gratification, like watching TV or scrolling on the phone, is much easier than doing those long-term rewards like learning a new piece of music or getting in shape. Earlier, I mentioned the intention-action gap. Apparently, there's been a whole research study on that, and there is a website that I will link for you that has some cute graphics and more information about it. But you can imagine on one side of like a cliff, or it's an animated cartoon drawing. On one side, there's a stick figure, and he says, "Best intentions ever." And on the other side, it looks like maybe a beautifully decorated Easter egg or something, and that is the super awesome outcome. And in between those two things is this gap, and it says the flaming gap of blah, maybe later. And there's fire coming up from the thing. So I'll link that up in the show notes, but it's so good. It's so true. And it makes me feel a little bit better to know that I'm not alone in the way I put things off or the way I delay doing things that I know would be good to do. The things that I really want to have done, it's just getting into the action phase. So I hope we can both agree that's not laziness, it's just human nature. And your child isn't alone if they are resistant to practice. They're actually being very human. When a student leaves my studio after we've had a lesson together, I don't think they walk out the door and say, I don't care what Miss Shelley says. I'm not going to open my books. I'm not going to practice. Don't want to do it. I hope they leave my studio excited because we've played music together. I've given them some practice strategies. We've set some goals about what they want to accomplish with their pieces. And so I hope as they are leaving the studio, they feel motivated and confident and ready to put in some good work this coming week. But we all know that the world happens and things happen and things kind of get in our way. So let's talk for just a little bit about piano practice, more specifically for your piano kid. You might hear some delays where they would say, "Oh, okay, yes, I need to practice. I'll do it after dinner." Or, "I'm too tired today. I'll try it again tomorrow. I'll do double tomorrow, in fact." I have a family who the mom they were just here yesterday, and the two daughters in this, family were, what's the word? Auditioned and accepted into the ballet at our local junior college for the Nutcracker. So they are gonna start having some pretty intense ballet practices in the evenings. Apparently 2 days a week, they have these late ballet practices. That's 2 days a week now in September. Who knows how much more it's gonna get in October and November. So I've made a mental note that as we go, their practice is gonna be, more scarce. But right now, the mom said, because we know we've got those 2 late nights, we're giving ourselves the day off from piano on those 2 days, but then we are being very intentional to get our practice in on the other days. And it was so sweet the way this mom and her 2 daughters and I was in on the conversation that we're all a team. We know this is a challenge. This is what we're gonna do to overcome this challenge. Way to go, Mom. I think that's really smart. Sometimes kids, we're talking about kids right now, but this is true for us adults as well. They intend to practice, just not right now. Yes, I'll get to it. My lesson's not until next week, so I've got plenty of time. Practicing piano is mentally and physically demanding. Even 10 minutes can feel really hard and overwhelming. And the longer they delay, the harder it is to begin, and then guilt starts to set in. I have another link that I'll share in the show notes, an interview with Becky Laurent from several years ago, talking about the first 24 hours and the value of practicing within that first day after your piano lesson, because your brain retains so much more information. The music that you played at the piano lesson, the instruction you received from your piano teacher is going to be much more easy to recall within those first 24 hours. If you skip the next day after your lesson and then you've got extra homework the day after that, and then finally it's 3 days past the lesson, you open your books and you feel like you're just staring at a blank canvas. You know you talked about it with your teacher, but you don't really remember the details. And I remember that I was supposed to do something with my fingers, but what was that again? And okay, I knew this would be too hard, so I'm going to not even practice at all. I'll try again tomorrow, maybe. If you can overcome this delay, and if you can set up some routines, then rather than piling on guilt for, I didn't do it again, and now I knew this was going to be too hard, rather than that, if you do a little bit of practice, especially within those first 24 hours, rather than piling on guilt, now you're building on a history of success. And doesn't that feel much better? I know we're talking about kids, but just thinking for myself, sometimes I can talk myself into doing something when I think about how fun it will be to see that it is done. Like my front flower bed. I don't want to work in the front flower bed. That's so much work and it's going to be hot and yuck. But then if I do it and I just get it done, then every time I come home, there's my nice, clean flower bed ready to greet me. And that's sometimes enough motivation to just get up and do the work. Something to remember, going back to thinking about our kids, they want to be good at piano. Sometimes they don't realize how much work is involved to being able to play the piano well. And even though they want to be good at piano, they still are going to struggle with practicing. You know that it's true. Motivation follows action, not the other way around. Sometimes we think, I'll do this thing whenever I get motivated. But really, it's doing the thing that brings the motivation along. And then the motivation helps you keep your momentum going. But you have to start with the action. And we know that parents struggle with this too. Thinking in terms of with your piano kids, maybe you are struggling with setting up some sort of consistent practice routine for them. Maybe you could talk to your teacher about concerns. They keep saying their music is hard, or they keep saying their music is boring. They're not interested in this. Is there something else that you could offer them? There are thousands upon thousands, if not millions, of teaching pieces that students can use to learn to play the piano. And if something's not clicking with your kid and you've tried some different strategies at home, have a conversation with your teacher. Let them know, for some reason, we're just hitting a block. Is there some way else, some other piece of music that will still teach them the concept you want them to learn, but something that might be a little bit of a better connection? I love it when parents talk to me about struggles they're having at home. I have had lots of experience with lots of kids, and something that they maybe are new to, they haven't experienced this with their child. Maybe I've experienced it with a dozen other piano kids, and I've got just the piece or just the strategy that can help their piano kid feel more confident with this piece or with this concept, and we can move on together. That's why you've hired me, after all. That's why you've hired your teacher. Use them for their expertise, not just for the music, but how to communicate musically with your piano kid. Sometimes just listening to your piano kid play after you've had a long day and you just want some peace and quiet, and then your piano kid starts practicing, you know that's good. You know they should be practicing, but man, wouldn't it be nice just to have a little bit of quiet in your home for a bit? So you've got your own struggles. Life is full between work and home and your own emotional energy, which I'll talk a little bit more about that. So be compassionate with yourself while you're being compassionate with your piano kid. You don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfect, but we do need to try to be present and maybe even more intentional with doing those things that we want to do, not right now. So I've got a couple of ideas to share, some simple strategies that might help us overcome that delay. With your piano kids, maybe you can just do the 5-minute rule. Just sit at the piano for 5 minutes. Very often, getting started, sitting at the piano, is the hardest step. You've heard this before for yourself. Putting on the workout clothes is the hardest thing. Tying your tennis shoes is the hardest thing. Once you get that done, well, you're already dressed and moving and ready, so just keep on going. If you have a keyboard at your home, especially a portable keyboard, consider finding a place that it can stay out and set up all the time so that your piano kid or you are not having to drag it out from under the bed, plug it in, set it up, find a chair, where's the music stand, get your music. All of that is a big obstacle to overcome. So if you can just keep the keyboard set up, maybe in their room or in a corner in the home, then it's ready to go. Keep your books open on the music rack to the current song that you're practicing. Then all you have to do is walk up, have a seat, and start playing. Remove any of those hindrances that would hold you back from doing the practice. Your goal is practice, so you don't want to have to do all of these other things just to get to the practice. I have one mom who told me she has started a little practice chart at home, and when her son does his practice, then he gets to put a sticker, and when he accumulates so many stickers, then whatever is something that's interesting to him, whether it's maybe a special treat at the dollar store, maybe it's getting to stay up 15 minutes later, maybe it's reading an extra book before bedtime, whatever is interesting to her kid, that's what the prize will be when he accomplishes that goal. And she said the home practice is going so much more smoothly because he has that external motivation. As a child, immature, lack of experiences because he's only been alive for 7 years, he doesn't have the intrinsic motivation that a lot of us even struggle with as adults. So as the parent, she is helping him with some external motivation. I also, in my studio, offer lots of different ways for external motivation. And if you're watching the YouTube, I've got this bucket of beads over my shoulder, and over my other shoulder, hanging in the window, I've got strings of beads. My students are collecting beads this year, and for practicing, if they practice, well, if they show up for lessons, I'm still just going to give them a bead because I feel like that's a little bit of a motivation. And if they do an outstanding practice, they might get up to 5 beads. And then I've got this student has earned some stars, and I won't go into all the details about how he's earned these stars. There's also a sports bead because he calculated his minutes of practice. He got over 100 minutes of practice this past week. So he got to have a football bead. Football field has 100 yards. He got 100 minutes of practice. And I've got some other things up my sleeve throughout the year, some little external motivators, different fun beads that they can collect throughout the year. And I have heard from so many parents who are telling me that has been a good motivator. They will practice for more beads. And I haven't mentioned the quality of practice. Hopefully the quality follows the quantity, but right now we're just celebrating the starts. We'll worry about the finishes later. Sometimes I'll challenge my piano kids to beat your parent to the piano. What I mean by that is you go practice before your parent has a chance to remind you. If they remind you, they won. If you get to the piano before they remind you, you win. And what a way to celebrate that. I was talking about emotional energy earlier. And for us parents, since we are the adults in the room, somebody's got to be the grown up. Sometimes we have to develop some systems, some external motivators for our piano kids. That practice chart, like I mentioned from that mom, maybe that's the thing that will click perfectly for your piano kid. Situation resolved. Maybe you have to schedule it like brushing your teeth. It's 4:00, so it's time to go practice. It's not a decision you have to make. You don't have to expend your own emotional energy after a long day at work. Oh, I put a reminder on my phone. Ding, ding, ding. It's time to go practice. It's not something we negotiate about. It's not something we argue about. It just is. At 8:00, 8:30, whatever your bedtime is, it's bedtime, time to go to bed. It's not something you talk about or argue about. Your child may try, but you've already made the decision. It's already on the schedule. We just do it. Piano practice can be the same way. Wouldn't it be nice to have that decision already made for you, even if you're the one who made the decision when you put the reminder on your phone a couple of weeks ago? James Clear talks about triggers. And, actually, Charles Duhigg talks about triggers. James Clear talks about stacking habits. And to me, those are very, very much related. I mentioned that me walking after work is a new development. My schedule changed this year. So on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm working at this daycare for a couple of hours in the morning. And at this daycare, they have a beautiful lane along kind of a back driveway, not a lot of traffic, shaded with beautiful trees. It's almost like walking through a park. And so I determined when school started, since I don't have to rush to my next job on those 3 days, I've got a little bit of wiggle room. I am taking myself for a walk. Right now, it's just 1 lap down the lane and back. It's not quite a mile. I'll have to make a double lap or something to get over a mile. Takes maybe 15, 20 minutes. And as I'm walking, then I'm listening to that new podcast. So I have this treat that I look forward to because I'm enjoying that podcast. I also have the beauty of walking in the shade. The temperatures are dropping. Anyway, it's become a nice little habit. And I don't have to think about it because I made the decision at the beginning of the school year. And every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, there's been a couple of days that I was sort of looking forward to some rain. If it rains, then maybe I don't have to go for the walk. But it hasn't. Well, it was raining one morning, but it stopped by the time it was time for my walk. And I'm so glad. And then after I finish the walk, I've done that. That's something I have completed. I can build on that history of success instead of piling on guilt. Oh, I didn't do it again today. Another concept that's kind of new to my vocabulary is called body doubling. You may be familiar with body doubling. I've heard it more like co-working, and I'll have a link to a body doubling website. But in essence, it's where you and another person, you're not doing the same job, you're not doing the same task, but you're working at the same time. And I think this would be an awesome thing for you and your piano kid. Look, piano kid, it is time for you to practice. And let's set a timer. Why don't you practice for about 15 minutes? I also have a job that I've been putting off, and while you're practicing, I'm going to go organize the closet or mop the floor or whatever chore you have been putting off, and you're both doing your separate tasks, but you're doing it at the same time. I'm resistant to say misery loves company, but I think you know what that, if I've got to do this job, you've got to do this job, we can do it together. Not that piano practice should be a misery. Not that taking care of your closet should be a misery, but your attitude can be miserable. And knowing that you're not alone, your piano kid knowing that they're not alone can help both of you put that intention into action and overcome your human nature and not delay what you want to get done, actually make it happen. And what a good lesson for your piano kid to learn. If they see, okay, this is something, I'm not weird. I don't hate piano just because getting to the piano to practice is a challenge. My mom, my dad also has things that need to be done that are hard for them to make themselves do. And as they grow up and they see that this was a strategy that worked for you as an adult, then once they get off to college or start their own families, those will be the things that they recall. Oh yeah, this was a cool trick that my mom did when I was little. I'm going to try that trick now for myself. Maybe they'll try it with their own children at some point. And as I mentioned earlier, you can team up with your teacher. Maybe they have studio challenges like my beads that I use in the studio. Maybe they have some other things. I have my Fall into Music practice challenge that includes some cute little practice buddies, Mabel the maple leaf, and Oakley, and who's the other one? Bert the birch leaf. Cute little printable practice buddies that can sit up on your piano and they can join your piano kid when they're practicing. There's an incentive chart that they can mark off. The goal is to practice 20 times within a 30-day span. If I had told you about this at the beginning of September, you could have done it then because September has 30 days. It's the beginning of the school year. Let's start a new habit of getting in some regular practice. Let's aim for 20 out of the 30. But you can choose any 30-day span of time. November also has 30 days, so you could do the Fall into Music practice challenge then. But I also have the Pianovember practice challenge. I'll tell you about that briefly. During the month of November, we try to get as many practice tallies as possible. And you can get tallies for playing new pieces and old pieces and review pieces and memory pieces and working on something by ear. Every time you play a piece, every piece you play, every time you play it, give yourself a tally. And there's a website, pianovember.com, where you can log your practice tallies and you can check the leaderboard and see who has the most practice tallies. And it's not just my studio, it's not just you in your home, but you'll be seeing students from around the world. We've had students all over the United States and in several countries across the world that participate in this free challenge. Talk about external motivation. When it gets to the end of the month and you can see the leaderboard be much more active because someone practiced and they collected 10 tallies, and then they jumped ahead of you, so now you've got to practice a few more tallies to get ahead of them, and the action keeps going until the stroke of midnight on November 30th. I'll have the Fall into Music practice challenge and the Pianovember practice challenge linked up in the show notes today at pianoparentpodcast.com/366. But let's see about wrapping up today's episode. What else do we need to talk about? You need to set up real expectations, not just for yourself, but for your piano kid. If we know that human nature delays and we tend to follow the path of least resistance, it's easier to do the things that are instantly gratifying than delay gratification and set ourselves up with systems for long-term rewards. If we know this is true about ourselves, then we know it's definitely true for our children. It's so disappointing to me whenever a piano parent, or I will hear of a piano parent who said, well, they never would practice. And if they loved it, if they were interested in it, then they would practice. That is not fair. That is a not fair statement, especially for a child 8 years old, who doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the maturity, the tools to make themselves do things that they maybe want to do, but they're not motivated to do it in the moment. If we struggle with these things as adults, of course our children struggle with these things, and who are they going to depend on to help them with some external motivation, some systems for success? They're going to count on their parents to teach them these things. And so I hope that you will set some realistic expectations for your piano kid and yourself, and that the two of you can work as a team. Maybe it's by body doubling, co-working. You do this and I'll do this and we'll do it at the same time. And then we can celebrate together when the job is done. Figure out ways that you and your piano kid can work together for this beautiful goal of learning to make music, learning to play the piano. You've got plenty of other things in your life that both of you can stress about. Making music shouldn't be one of them. Every step forward counts. Those practice tallies in Pianovember. I don't care how short the song is. If you played it on the piano, boom, that's a tally mark. Even if you stumbled yesterday, today is a new chance to try again. The Bible says His mercies are new every morning. Whew, what a relief that is. So I wonder which of these suggestions, maybe body doubling or practice habit stacking or downloading a practice challenge, which one of these do you think will make a better connection with your piano kid? I would love to hear which new habit you try. Maybe that practice chart, like I was telling you about, that one mom is doing a practice chart for her son. Or maybe just looking at your schedule and recognizing, these are our 2 long ballet days. So we're not going to worry about practice on those days, but we'll be intentional to practice the other days. Is that something that will work for your piano kid? You may have your own suggestions of things that are working for your piano kid. I'd love to hear about it. You can reach me through Instagram at Piano Parent Podcast, or you can email me, Shelley, at pianoparentpodcast.com. I would love to hear what's working. I'd love to hear your questions. I'd love to hear if there's another topic that you're curious about, something you'd like for me to share on the podcast. I appreciate you so much for listening. I appreciate what you're doing with your piano kid. I appreciate the way that you are encouraging them to practice and maybe even showing them your vulnerabilities, that there are things that are hard for you to do too, and you can encourage each other. There's a quote that I'll close with from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It says, "You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take one step." Maybe just sitting down at the piano, opening your piano books is the one step that you need. And then tomorrow, leave the books open on your music rack. Tomorrow, you can see about playing one of those pieces. You can do it. Your piano kid can do it. I did it. I walked this morning. I recorded a new podcast. Hooray. Let's celebrate that success and use that to encourage us for the next thing that we want to achieve. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.